Greetings, this is the Mad Hermit with you once again for another poetry reading installment, and we are going to read something from our old friend, W.B. Yeats, and the poem we're going to read is The Stolen Child. Now this is a very popular poem for all those of you who know Yeats. So before we go any further, let's read the poem. The Stolen Child by W.B. Yeats. Where dips the rocky highland of Sleuthwood in the lake, there lies a leafy island where flapping herons wake. The drowsy water rats, there we've hid our fairy fats, full of berries and of reddest stolen cherries. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you could understand. Where the wave of moonlight glosses the dim gray sands with light, far off by farthest Rosses we footed all the night, weaving olden dances, mingling hands and mingling glances, till the moon has taken flight, to and fro we leap, and chase the frothy bubbles, while the world is full of troubles, and is anxious in its sleep. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Where the wandering water gushes from the hills above Glencar, in pools among the rushes that scarce could bathe a star, we seek for slumbering trout, and whispering in their ear, give them unquiet dreams, leaning softly out from ferns that drop their tears over the young streams. Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Away with us he's going, the solemn-eyed, he'll hear no more the lowing of the calves on the warm hillside, or the kettle on the hob sing peace into his breast, or see the brown mice bob round and round the oatmeal chest. For he comes, the human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, from a world more full of weeping than he could understand. This is a very interesting poem. Obviously, for those of you who know W.B. Yeats, he was very enamored by Irish folklore, European legends, and during his early career he wrote a lot about that. And he continued to write about it throughout his career, and The Stolen Child is just one of the major poems they've written about folklore. And basically this poem is based off of the folklore of the changeling. For those of you who don't know, changeling, basically it happens whenever a fairy encounters a human child, and one of the habits these fairies would tend to do is swap that human child with one of their own offspring, which is a changeling. The reasons why these fairies would do it, based on the folk tales, is varying. Sometimes they do it because they want to raise a human servant. Another reason is because they simply love human children. And another one is they simply did it out of malicious. Now, basically, all in all, these fairies did for something that's not good. Basically, they had ill intent most of the time. The thing that makes The Stolen Child very unique, though, is despite the fact that this poem is based on the changeling myth, which portrayed changelings as being mischievous in their habit of abducting children, this poem actually presents them in a manner where they're doing what they're doing as an act of mercy, as though they're saving this child from the worries of the human world. As you can see by the repeated lines throughout all the stanzas, come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild, with a fairy hand in hand, for the world's more full of weeping than you can understand. Now, the interesting part of this is, when I read this poem earlier this day, one of the things that came to mind is all the stolen children of this world. Now, I know it's a far leap, but for those of you who have children, for those of you who are parents, it's not something that's really not hard to think about. You think of all the things that happen throughout the world, all the wars, all the disasters, all the weeping that happens throughout the world, and you look at your child and you think about what you can do to shield this child from all that suffering. Depending where you live, children can be stolen through various means, through peer pressure, drugs, the streets, other unwholesome things. And the thing is, you always have the temptation of asking yourself, what can I do? What can I do? Should I just keep this child sheltered? And, one of the things that the fairies use throughout this poem to seduce the child, and ultimately they're successful, is, we're bringing you to a better place. We are saving you. And that ultimately ends up seducing the child. But when one reads this poem, a poem such as The Stolen Child, one must ask, what would happen if this child's parents, mother or father, had a very close relationship with this child? Would the fairies have been successful? If these parents really cared for this child, would this child ever be left alone to become prey to these fairies? And if the parents really shown love to this child, and this child felt that love, and they had a close relationship through that, would this child have given in to the seduction of these fairies? I don't want to go on preaching and sounding all, on a pulpit, banging my fist or anything like that. I'm not really into that anyway. But the main question you have to ask yourself, especially if you have children or you're going to have children, is that, being a parent isn't just having the title. Being a parent is about talking to your children when they need to be talked to. It's about showing the child what's right and what's wrong. It's about being your brother's keeper, but in this case, it's your child's keeper. And in that sense, we can keep our children from being stolen, because there's a lot of things in this world that could steal our children away. And the answer is not keeping the child sheltered and shielded from the miseries of the world, because if you look at the poem, if the parents really cared for this child, and if there was a relationship between this child and his parents, despite the fact that the fairies are right in the fact that there's lots of weeping in the world beyond his own understanding. Personally, I got a feeling now, obviously William Butler Yeats never intended this poem to be as speculative as this, but this is just me. I got a feeling that even despite the fact that the child does know about the suffering of the world, if the parents really nurtured and had a relationship with him, all that seduction that the fairies can throw at this child would just fall lifeless on the ground. Now, this is just my belief, but I think it's really something to think about whenever you read a poem like Stolen Child. But anyway, for those of you who want to read this poem on your own, obviously I've included the entire poem right below this video blog on my personal blog, which is themadhermit.blogspot.com. And for those of you who want to comment, feel free to comment. And before I use up my YouTube time, this has been The Mad Hermit, and I am signing off. Happy reading.